The human mind has long been capable of concocting new and horrifying ways to punish supposed transgressors, villains, witches, and anybody else who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. We've all heard of the classic standbys: hanging, burning, and stoning. But what if you have truly wronged? Like killing someone, starting a revolution, or maybe looking at royalty the wrong way? That's what we'll talk about in today's video, and probably a couple more videos to come. The worst punishments in the history of mankind. The Catherine Wheel. The Catherine Wheel, also known as the breaking wheel, was a popular torture device in Europe throughout the Middle Ages. The Catherine Wheel had been used to punish criminals and other accused people since antiquity, though its use grew increasingly common throughout the medieval period. This tormentor is frequently associated with St. Catherine of Alexandria, and while the practice was widespread across Europe, it was especially popular in France and Germany. The Catherine Wheel's history can be traced back to when it was utilized as a torture device for capital punishment. During the reign of the Holy Roman Empire, the wheel was mostly reserved for men convicted of serious murder. The penalty was widespread throughout medieval times, but it was phased away at the start of the early modern age. The Catherine Wheel was also known as the breaking wheel because it was used to break the accused bones and crush them to death. It was also known as the wheel at times, and those who endured torture and death as a result of it were said to be broken on the wheel. The Catherine Wheel was made up of a big wooden wagon wheel with many radial spokes. A condemned prisoner was lashed to the wheel and beaten with a club or iron cudgel. There were numerous versions of the device, and it sometimes included a wooden cross. The victim's body might likewise be displayed on the wheel after his death. It might be a protracted and agonizing death, and people could live up to 4 days before succumbing. This happened in 1348 to a Jewish man named Bonadies, who was allegedly broken on the Catherine Wheel. The condemned on the Catherine Wheel could undergo long periods of torture, and victims in some circumstances lived for several days. Alternatively, the torture victim could die quickly as a result of the executioner's strikes to his chest and stomach. These blows were known as coups de grace. The Strapado. The Strapado torture device was used to torment heretics, witches, and other types of prisoners throughout medieval times. In comparison to more sophisticated torture devices of the Middle Ages, the mechanism of this device was quite simple. It was nevertheless extremely painful, and the victim's limbs may be dislocated at the very least. The apparatus is well known because of its widespread use during the Spanish Inquisition. The Strapado torture device came in 3 varieties. The first is the most basic, with the victim's arms bound behind his or her back with a rope. The victim is then hung in the air by their arms after the rope is passed through a pulley. This could result in limb dislocation and other types of physical harm. The victim was released at intervals in the second type of Strapado, only to be abruptly stopped in mid-air, increasing the intensity of the suffering. Finally, in the third type, a weight might be placed on the victim's feet, increasing the intensity of the torment once again. The Strapado torture device was employed at various times throughout medieval history. It was especially common during the Spanish Inquisition, when various torture devices were used to gain confessions from alleged heretics and witches. Keel-hauling. Torture is infamous for its savagery and inventive methods of causing agonizing pain, and keel-hauling is no different. Keel-hauling is a method of punishment employed by the Navy and pirates in the 17th and 18th centuries to punish the worst offenders, along with people who didn't subscribe to YouTube channels they love. So, leave a like and subscribe, as it may save your life. In keel-hauling, the victim is suspended by a rope from the ship's mast with a weight attached to his legs. When the crew members let go of the rope, the victim falls into the sea and is dragged along the ship's keel or bottom, hence the term keel-hauling. Aside from the apparent agony, this area of the ship was covered with barnacles, causing lacerations to the keel-hauled victim. As horrific as it seems, there has been much debate regarding the reality behind keel-hauling, including how gruesome it was, how frequently it was done, and who exactly used it as a form of torture. The phrase keel-hauling is cited by English writers in 17th century texts. However, the references are scant and hazy. It's difficult to get a detailed account of the Royal Navy's practice. The Dutch appear to have the most concrete evidence depicting the official usage of keel-hauling as punishment. A picture titled The Keel-Hauling of Admiral Jan van Nesse's Ship's Surgeon by Lief Peters, for example, is housed in the Rijksmuseum Museum in Amsterdam and dates from 1660 to 1686. The description of the artwork gives some information on the procedure, indicating how Dutch Admiral van Nesse's surgeon was keel-hauled. The procedure is described as a terrible punishment in which the condemned man was carried beneath the ship's keel on a rope, and was a terrifying message to all seamen. In the preserved Universal Dictionary of the Marine from 1780, the British described the method as plunging the delinquent repeatedly down the ship's bottom on one side and hauling him up on the other after having gone under the keel. However, it also states that the convict is permitted adequate intervals to recover the perception of pain, implying that the punishment's ultimate purpose is not death. The British reportedly stopped using keel hauling in 1720, although the Dutch did not legally prohibit it as a form of torture until 1750. The Iron Maiden. The Iron Maiden was another horrific instrument allegedly employed throughout medieval times in Europe. The front of the device included two doors, an upright sarcophagus, and spikes on the interior side. The apparatus was so complicated that it was once thought to be a fictitious technology with no true reality. However, several written records of the gadget were later discovered, confirming that the device was really popular, albeit not during the medieval period. Although it is connected with medieval times, there is little substantial evidence that it was employed as a torture device during that time period. While a number of terrible torture devices were used in medieval Europe, there is little evidence of their being used prior to the late 18th century. According to some reports, the Iron Maiden's design was inspired by a medieval contraption known as the Schandmantel, which literally means coat of disgrace or barrel of shame. However, while the outward structure of both devices was very similar, the previous gadget, unlike Iron Maiden, lacked any iron spikes, which made a significant difference. Its operation method was fairly basic. It included two doors that could be opened and closed. The victim was forced to enter the structure, which resembled a standing coffin, but had sharp spikes on the interior. Once inside, the doors were shut, and the spikes pierced many organs of the body. However, in order to prevent the victim from dying instantly, the spikes were not made too lengthy. This meant that they would only cause minor wounds and that the victim would bleed to death over several hours. The placement of the spikes within the Iron Maiden was critical to the torture. The spikes were placed in such a way that they caused damage to numerous bodily functions, but never enough to cause death. Two spikes, for example, were put expressly to puncture the eyeballs. Similarly, spikes were inserted for the chest, genitals, and other body organs. The number of spikes inside the Iron Maiden varied by device, and it was carefully assured that the spikes did not penetrate very deep inside the organs in order to prolong the suffering. Thank you for watching today's video, and if you did enjoy it, subscribe and watch the next part of the series to know about more horrifying punishment methods.